Hello. Today this is Laura Fuchs, and I'm going to be experimenting with a new way of getting some of the basic information that I usually give at the top of each COPE meeting via video. So hopefully it can save some time on some meetings and also spread the kind of just updates to a wider audience. And I certainly would appreciate feedback on things you want to hear about, things I should be including in the update, or ways to make it more useful. So first, our next COPE meeting will be Monday, November 4th at 5 p.m. at the Washington Teachers Union headquarters. And we'll be working on our endorsement process, focused primarily on finalizing our questionnaire. And you should keep your eyes open for emails if you're interested in helping us create our candidate questionnaire for moving forward. So first updates are from the State Board of Education. First, we are definitely looking for people to sign up to testify in an upcoming public hearing. It's at 5:30 p.m. October 23rd, and they're asking for testimonies on teacher turnover. You can sign up as well as email your testimony to sboe@dc.gov by October 21st. The testimonies usually start right away around 5:40, and you can often be out by 6 p.m. because very few people sign up to testify. So it'd be really great if we can get a lot of people to sign up. They're only 3 minutes long, so that's usually a page, maybe a page and a half worth of written testimony. You don't have to write something in advance if you'd rather just speak off the top of your head. The main thing we're looking for, though, is why people are leaving the classroom. We know that DCPS loves to spin it and say that 90% plus of effective educators are staying year to year. We know this is not true. And so they also like to say that there's lots of reasons people leave that are not tied to impact. We also know that's not true. And sorry if you hear my pets in the background, but this is where I can record. Last month, I testified on budget transparency at the State Board of Education, mainly getting to the idea that we can use the state report card to increase transparency, and that OSSI can actually define terms when it comes to what is central office employee, what is a school-based staff, and that they could demand the kind of transparency from all the sectors that the council is currently refusing to. Other things that are going on with the State Board of Education that we should keep our eye out for: there will be an eventual reimagining of the social studies standards being run by Jessica Sutter. They're also going to continue to look at teacher turnover. At the last meeting, they talked about the science standards and the science test. And while you don't have to testify on any particular issue, you can bring any issues you want to the State Board of Education. Again, very few people testify, so it is a chance to have your voice heard very clearly on issues related to education, bring things to their attention, not get lost in the barrage of emails that they might get. The Council of DC has several upcoming hearings. There's things changing all the time. It's very active. My main suggestion is that you go to the link that we see at the top there, which is bit.do/education hearings, and you can always see the latest bills that are up for being discussed. The one that occurred last Wednesday was on budget transparency, and there were a lot of WTU members who took time off of work to attend during the day, as well as President Davis. We testified in favor of increased budget transparency under Charles Allen's legislation for charter schools. Currently, there's also discussion and markup of both Grasso's transparency bill and Charles Allen's transparency bill. The basic tenets of which would be to increase the amount of transparency that charters are subject to, including the Open Meetings Act and FOIA. Charles Allen legislation also would call for teachers to be included on the boards of charter school boards, all of which I think would be very valuable for their schools. You can still submit written testimony for the next probably week or so if you're interested, and you can find the email and everything on that link at the top. Grasso is very hostile to pretty much any effort made to increase transparency both in DCPS and in the public charter sector. And while he's saying that he's trying to increase transparency, the fact is that it's not adding up. And the latest word is that in the current editing of Grasso's bill, pretty much anything that we would have liked has been removed, and it's been completely watered down by the lobbyists who so clearly seem to own him in this process. So we need to make sure our voices continue to be heard, and we'll just encourage you to make sure to contact the council to let them know that you are in favor of budget transparency. I'm not really sure whether or not the bill is going to pass, so we do want to make sure that we keep the pressure up moving forward. Updates from the Deputy Mayor for Education. What I've been hearing in meetings that he's been attending across the city is basically this language regarding how budgets are not increasing at the rate we thought they would, and so we're going to need to start making some hard decisions when it comes to finances. It's pretty clear that the language they're using here is setting up for our contract negotiations, so if there's any talk of increasing, pay and getting raises, that they're going to push back on that with this narrative. What's interesting is that the Council of DC, the budget office, they just released something saying that we have additional money that we didn't anticipate this year thanks to strong business funds. On top of that, there's also information that came out today that really the amount that we've been taxing the highest income earners has been steadily decreasing, and that we could in fact increase that here in DC to increase revenue. So there's always an issue of increasing revenue, especially on our largest businesses and our wealthiest properties. So if you would like to see the Deputy Mayor of Education in person and counter that narrative in person, he'll be attending the Ward 3 Democrats meeting alongside Chancellor Farabee on Tuesday, October 27th between 7 and 8:30 p.m. at 4901 Connecticut Avenue. And they are encouraging anyone to come. You don't have to be in Ward 3. You don't have to have any associations in Ward 3. They just like to hear your perspectives. So you should try to make it out to that meeting. And if you hear them mentioning how we don't have finances, consider how that might be tied to this idea that they can't afford to give teachers any raises in the upcoming years because finances are tight. And you should also notice that they've also been blaming our raises for the budget cuts that occurred inside of our schools. And they also blamed teacher pay and saying that we have too many experienced teachers and that's why things are costing so much on the $10 million budget shortfall. All of these things they have not really proven. And on top of that, they have a gigantic central office, one of the largest central offices in the nation in DC public schools. And so it doesn't necessarily add up that it's teacher salaries and teacher paychecks that are causing the problems, when in fact we know that central office has far larger salaries than we do, that they've been giving themselves raises far more often than we get them, and that their ever increasing size and the corresponding contracts and projects that they do are probably driving up costs far more than anything that's coming out of our paychecks. Aussie, there isn't really much new to report. There are things that are currently being discussed, but it's always hard to know how far advanced they are in this discussion, whether they're serious about it. There's always talk of pilot programs and this and that, but it's hard to kind of see through the top level spin as to what's really going on. What we do know is that for special education, if you have concerns about what's going on inside of your school, there's actually a way to trigger a state investigation through Aussie. And hopefully at our next COPE meeting or sometime in the month of November, we'll hear from the AGE, which is a nonprofit that filed one of these state reports against 5 DCPS schools, and they actually won a demand from OSSE that DCPS put more qualified teachers inside of those 5 schools to make sure that special education students are receiving their services. This is incredibly key. We need to make sure that this is a tool that teachers are trained to use. And it's certainly worth looking into. For DCPS, some of what we're hearing are a couple things from Chancellor Farabee. One is this idea of the changing how our schools are funded. We know that how they're funded is currently not working. We have the comprehensive staffing model, and DCPS has been using this as kind of a black box so that no one really knows what's going on when it comes to funding our local schools. And so they've been floating language about moving to what they call student-based budgeting. This is going to be something that we're going to need to really dig into, but by all accounts, this is not the direction we want to go. What we're probably going to want to ask for is for DCPS to simply enforce the comprehensive staffing model, because when it comes down to it, this model protects our small schools. If we move to a student-based budgeting formula, then small schools, if they receive a drop in enrollment, then their budgets get slammed. Whereas with comprehensive staffing model, you have kind of these wider windows within which you still receive certain things no matter how much they cost, and that there's always kind of this baseline. On top of this, we need to definitely watch the Chancellor carefully on language surrounding the protection of small schools. Repeatedly, we've heard the Chancellor say that small schools are unsustainable, and the suggestions being made here are that schools will be consolidated, aka closed. So we need to watch DCPS carefully with the language that the Chancellor is using around town. The Public Charter School Board fought the transparency bill very heavily, are engaged in some really shady lobbying practices and pressures on their schools and teachers to testify against the transparency legislation. And the question really becomes, what do they have to hide? They do have public meetings, and they're certainly interesting to attend and interesting to speak up about, and certainly welcome anyone to submit public comment or to show up themselves. I show up often. I'm not sure if I'll make this meeting, but if I can, then I will. To that end, here are a bunch of the meetings that are coming up around the city dedicated to education. Starting this week with the Ward 4 Education Alliance and going all the way into November, the Ward 7 Education Council. If you have any meetings that you think I should add to the list, please feel free to email me. There are some potential solidarity campaigns that the WTU has been asked to potentially participate in and are worth thinking about. Either as an organization or as individuals. So the Rally to Reclaim Rent Control could be really big when it comes to helping make this city affordable, both for our members, as well as the people who work in our buildings, as well as our students and our parents. There's also some interesting work being done on youth justice that's also worth potentially getting involved in. And lastly, parents that are part of the Shaw feeder pattern in Ward 1 have a survey that they're asking people to take as part of their campaign to make sure that the Shaw Middle School does open as a separate standalone middle school that's part of the Cardozo feeder pattern. And that's it for updates. So have a great night.